morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on the gender pay gap reporting with HRLocker. My name is Christelle Rinn, and I'm the COO here at HRLocker. The subject that we're going to be talking today about is the gender pay gap reporting, specifically the legislative requirements, but as well as that, I suppose, for those companies who are not actually legally required to report on the gender pay gap, we're going to talk about the benefits of reporting on the gender pay gap reporting and how you can set that up within your HRLocker system. So I'll be going through specifically to make sure that the report that you're getting out of HRLocker is correct and showing where the information is pulled from to make sure that you actually have all the information in the system. Excuse me. Actually, I'm just going to change this view just 1 second. So when we talk about the gender pay gap, what exactly are we talking about? And I think that sometimes there is a confusion in regards to the gender pay gap, that sometimes we look at it as simple as if a male is getting paid 50,000 euros for a job, a female is getting paid 40,000 for the same job, is that the gender pay gap? And it's important to realize that that is not a gender pay gap. That is something that on a legal basis should not be happening. The gender pay gap, when we're looking at it, is what exactly, regardless of the role that the male or female are taking in the workforce, regardless of the role, what is the difference between the average wage of a male or female in your workplace? Is there an overproportionate amount of people, females in the part-time side of things? Is there an overproportional amount of male in senior management positions? And what exactly is the gender pay gap? So even though we talk about the gender pay gap and a lot of the focus is on that perhaps if two people are working in the same job and one person is getting paid more for that job than the other person, it's important to remember that that is not the gender pay gap, that there is legislation around that to ensure that that does not actually happen. In terms of the gender pay gap reporting was signed into legislation last year, and it will be a requirement for 250 excess companies, and I'll go through that with you. But exactly what I said a second ago in regards to what can the gender pay gap tell us? For sure, there is a legislative requirement for companies of 250 plus, but why should companies actually be looking at it if you have less than 250 people? What exactly is the benefit to me as a company? So the benefit is, for you as a company to understand, is there a lack of female representation in senior management positions? So to understand, is there in your overall company structure, is it more male dominated at the top? And is that something that you'd like to work on to make sure, is there an unconscious bias in terms of that naturally males get promoted instead of females? Or or do you just not have a conducive working environment for females to be led into those senior management roles? What we've also seen over the last number of years is that there is an overrepresentation of women in lower paid roles. So that there are a number of social factors for that. A lot of the time it's because women are mostly the caregivers at home, and they may be looking for part-time roles, things like that. And I suppose over the last 20 years there's been a huge amount of steps forward in regards to making sure that females have the same options for going to university and the same career path progressions. But it is important that as a company that we are making sure that the space that we're in, that we are actually viewing, that we're given the same opportunities. And if you're running the report and it gives you some information in regards to, well, goodness, maybe I didn't realize that our company did have a misrepresentation between male and female. Maybe that's something that we'd like to look at. Maybe we'd like to understand why that gap is there. One of the things that are quite interesting actually with the report, which I think is really important. So right now in Ireland, the report is 250 employees plus, it's a legal requirement. In 2024, it'll be 150 plus, and in 2025, it'll be 50 plus employees. It will be a legal requirement to report on the gender pay gap. And it is required from all public bodies at the moment. But one of the things to, I suppose, kind of pay attention to is just because there may be a gender pay gap in your company doesn't mean that you're you're promoting inequality, or you're naturally, you're promoting men over females. Maybe it is just that over time in the industry that you're in, it usually isn't a female-dominated industry. And when you're doing the reports, there is a narrative around that has to go with each of these reports as well. And that narrative can explain why there is a gender pay gap issue, as well as maybe putting in place the steps that you're looking to solve that issue. Worldwide there is a gender pay gap issue. So if your company does have a gender pay gap issue, you're not the only ones. In fact, you'll probably be the majority rather than the minority. The other thing that's been quite interesting, that a lot of companies are now voluntarily reporting on their gender pay gap, and really using it, I suppose, as a recruitment tool as well. So if it is something that you're looking to show that you're a equal opportunity employer, it's a nice way to get that information. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm going to send these slides out afterwards. But specifically, there is going to be a lot of there are penalties involved with not reporting your gender pay gap for the 250 plus, and they will come down the line as well in regards to when the 50 plus comes in. So I do think at this stage, if you do have a robust HR system in place, the reporting is coming down the line. No harm in starting to collate that information now, just to be aware of it, understand how it's going to work, and understand how it's going to affect your company as well. So how to get started. So the number one thing, which I'm going to be going through with you today, is gathering all the relevant information. So for those of you who are using a HR system, if the information isn't in the system, you're not going to be able to report out on it. So just to make sure that salary information is correct, your contract information is correct, your length of service is correct, and I'll go through each of those with you as well. Understand how you're going to collect the information. So, if you are lucky to have some kind of HR system that you're using that's able to give the information, makes your life a bit easier. If you're going to be doing it manually, you need to think about how you're going to be doing that as well. And then I suppose the number one thing is, even though you have the information, it's important to understand, well, what are you going to do with the information? Are you actually going to be, if there is that information that there is a percentage difference, what are you going to do? What's your plan as a company? Are you going to maybe put in some mentoring for the female employees that you have? Are you going to put in, to understand, well, what's the reason why? Is maybe a hiring issue that naturally it's a male-dominated industry? So really to understand, to assist you, I suppose, in supporting the narrative that you have around the percentage gap that you have. So Jenny will send those slides on to you afterwards, just to make sure that you have an understanding exactly of the legal, the legalities around it, and also what the expectations are from a legislative purpose. But what I'm really going to go through today is, I suppose, how, when you're using HRLocker, what parameters you need to have entered in to be able to make sure that your gender pay gap report is correct. As always, I have Jenny with me today in regards to the questions and answers side of things. So if anybody has any questions throughout the webinar, please put in a question. I'll get back to them as soon as I get, either throughout the webinar or I'll answer them towards the end. But and feel free to touch base with me. Happy to answer any questions. So the gender pay gap report, the gender pay gap and the gender balance reporting, the two new reports that can be found when you go into reports into the employees section. It does take a lot of information in from the different directory information, so it is important that we have it set up correctly. So if I go into the directory over here, this is specifically when you're setting up an employee to make sure that you have all the information in correctly. So if you take this employee here, Andy Roberts, so in the directory here is where I am. And for those of you who aren't using HRLocker, the directory is where all your HR folders are kept. So each one of your employee information. So in here, when I select Andy Roberts, I'm going to go into, this is his employee information. So what we have in here is he's a manager. And if I go into the personal information, so this information can be filled in by the employee. And their gender, number one, is the first thing that people need to either select, female or male. And there is an undefined section as well. At the moment, there is no reporting around people who are selected undefined in terms of their gender. So the gender pay gap at the moment is purely male and female. That may change, but for the moment it is male and female. So if this person obviously is selected female, that's important to put in there. The terms of employment, it's important that so when you're doing the gender pay gap, there is a report in terms of comparing people who are on a full-time contract in comparison to those people who are on part-time contracts to see if there is a discrepancy there. So it's important when you're putting somebody in to make sure that you're putting in their actual contract, what type of contract they're in. And I'm just going to quickly go over through this page to make sure that people who aren't filling this page, it's important to fill it in. So put in their employment type, the contracted hours. So in their contract, how many hours does it say that they actually work? Is it 20, 40 hours, whatever it is? Their full-time equivalent. So that's a nice way to be pulling down a report in regards to how many full-time equivalents that you have as well. So that's important to be able to put in your contract type. The comps and bends. So this is where you're going to be putting in people's salary information, the bonus potential, bonus earned, and the benefits as well. So the salary information here, you're going to click that green add edit salary. So this person is on 120,000 euros per year. It's affected on the 25th of May 2022. So let's say this person is going to go up to 150,000 per year, and it's going to be effective, say, at the end of July. Okay. And you can put whatever notes that you have with this cost centers here as well that you can use as well. If you press submit, there'll be a second line here as well. Just to note when you're putting in the salaries, and we actually had this, I made this mistake in the beginning when I was preparing for this, is important when you're putting in the salary that you're choosing the per hour, per day, per week, per month, per year option. So it will drastically throw out your report if you put in 120,000 euros per month or per week, which happened to me. And I rang somebody in a TIS thinking that there was a problem with the system, but it was my own fault. So just make sure when you're putting it in that you're putting it in correct in the correct box, and the effective date as well. That's important. So if you wanted to change this one here, you're just going to put it in the past as well. So we can put in if for example, many of you may have started using the system this year and you want to put in information retrospectively, you can just change the date there. So if we put in the 25th of May 2020, maybe the person was on 100,000 euros at that stage, and we can just add it then. And you'll see there's just been another entry there as well. Okay. There's always a log here, so I'm logged in as Liz McMahon here. So whoever actually enters changes the salary, there's always a log here as well. So just to make note, the difference between the bonus potential and the bonus earned. So in somebody's contract, they may have their bonus potential. So maybe they have the potential to earn maybe, let's say, 5,000 euros. But so far this year, they have only earned, let's say, 3,000. Okay. So you can see the difference there in terms of the actual comparison. Should all staff have the salary per year as opposed to per week? It doesn't actually matter. So sorry, I'm just reading a question there. So there's two questions here. What does full-time equivalent mean, as well as should all staff have the salary per year as opposed to per week? So let me just answer those questions quickly. So in terms of when you're entering your salary here, we will make the calculations for the gender pay gap to make sure that everybody's compared the same. So if you want to put in terms of that somebody maybe is getting paid 10 euros an hour, you can put that there and we'll calculate it and compare it that everybody's paid the same, that it's comparing like with like. So whatever's in their contract, just put whatever is in their contract. So if you have people's contract that they're getting paid 500 euros a week, put that in there. If you have in their contract that it says that they're getting paid 30,000 euros a year, put that in. So it makes no difference. It's really what I would say is that put in what reflects what it says in their contract for that, but we'll make the calculation. And what does the full-time equivalent mean? So I'll just go back to the terms of employment here. So the full-time equivalent is here. It is a manual calculation you should do. But say, for example, if you're having to report out on how many employees you have, sometimes you may have to do that for some government reporting or government grants. You may need to say, well, how many full-time equivalents do you have? And what that means is somebody who may be working half-time, you would put in that their full-time equivalent is 0.5. It means they're only a value of a half an employee. I'm sure there are more value of that, but from a reporting purposes, they're only value of half. And then it'll add all together. So it'll add all your part-time staff as well as your full-time staff all together and give you a full-time equivalent. So you may technically have 30 staff, but some of them may be part-time. And so it'll give you a figure of maybe saying that you actually have 21 full-time equivalents, if that answers your questions. Sorry, excuse me. So the next question there is just in regards to the UK legislation. So from the new legal requirements from 2024 for organisations with 150 plus employees, is this applicable to all UK organisations? My understanding is yes, it is. And but after this, I will send out all of the specific legislation in comparison to Ireland and the UK and who exactly it is applicable to. And I would say is that, you know, from a legal standpoint, of course, it's something that we're going to have to do, even if, you know, because it's legislative. But no harm to be doing it now, even if you're not in that bracket that has to legally do it. You know, you can start to look at it now, start to put in some positive steps in place now. So we'll just go back here. So that answers your question in regards to the full-time equivalent. So if we go back to the comps and bends here, you'll see that I have this person's salary. So they have from 2020, they got 2 increases in 2022. So if you've just started using HRLocker, up to yourselves, you can either just put in the salaries that people are on right now, and that's obviously only going to give you 1 year of reporting. If you have the historical information, you can enter it all in here, and it will then also give you the historical information as well. I think I went through the bonus potential and the bonus earned. So bonus potential is maybe that's the amount that somebody can potentially earn over the next 12 months. And then the bonus earned then as well. So this is how much the person has actually been paid out. Benefits then as well. So important to be entering these as well, because that also creates a figure. So benefits when you're you can either start with managing. So if I go to manage here, these are the benefits that I have created already. You can add a benefit. What's the name? So we can put in VHI, maybe insurance. If you're using payroll, you can put in a payment ID. If you're, again, cost center, if you want to be deciding where this actually sits in the cost center. Description, so you can say plan B or whatever it is, and currency, and what's the value. We'll put in that there's a value of 500 euros there. Once you create it, you can then assign it out to either individuals. You can assign it out to an entire office, depending on what you want. Okay, so we can assign this one here to. We'll assign it to all offices. Okay, so now you see here, this person now has VHI, a value of 500 euros assigned to them as well. So now that you have, so it's important when you're putting in the salary, when you're looking to report out on the gender pay gap the gender pay gap reporting, that it won't work unless the salary is in here. So if somebody does not have a salary entered in here, they won't be reported on. So important that you have all that information in here. Just have a question here is what different types of roles have different salaries? How is this handled? So for each individual employee, you need to come here and enter in their salary, basically. So each individual person will have a different salary. So you report out, you don't report out on role base, you report out on individual people. So once individual salary is put in there, we report out on the individual person. So you have all the information here in regards to the salary. Just going to pop here back to terms of employment. You'll have their contract type in here as well. So that's all you'll have be able to report out on that. On the personal side of things here, their gender. Also important to note that if somebody has actually selected undefined, you know, it's not up to us to be going in here and changing it back to whatever gender we think we want to report out on. So important to leave it what the employee has selected. The other important thing to note is that there's also a report in regards to the length of service. So when a lot of people, when they start HRLocker, they may put in the start dates of basically the 1st of January 2022, and it's the date that they start the system. That isn't going to give you an accurate report in regards to the actual length of service that somebody has within the company. So really important to go back and make sure that you actually have their start dates in correctly, because again, that'll give you the report properly out on the actual length of service of the individual. Just to back to that person's question in regards to the different roles of different salaries. So for sure, this is another place to put in to make sure that you're putting in their job title here. When you're putting people's job titles in, you can put in their promotion as well, what their job grade is, and just pressing in here. Maybe their job grade is A5, and it's effective from February. You'll see their job is here, but that will not have any effect on their actual salary. You are going to actually have to go and put in what that person's contractual salary is. So yes, and I would I'm going to answer this question because I do agree with them, and this is why it's important with this narrative is, but depending on the role, the difference in salary could be quite substantial. Example, an MD would be a much bigger salary than a receptionist, which is normal, I understand. So how is this type of different cater from the gender pay gap? And that's why when you're reporting on the gender pay gap, it's important to have the narrative around it. So just go back into the reports here. So if we go to the reports here, you go into employees. There's two reports here that are important: the gender pay gap and the gender balance. Okay, so the gender balance is, I suppose it's quite clear. So you'll be able to basically look at your organization as a whole. First of all, in this organization, it's 58% are male, 42% are female. I can be able to split this out by department, by team, by office. So for example, maybe if I look at general admin, I can see that, well, everybody I think is in that, but maybe in your admin departments, things like that, there may be an over emphasis of females, or maybe not. But it's important to see, is there, even though there may be a balance at company level, if you drill down into actual department level, is there an actual misbalance there? Which again, may be totally fine. It's just make sure that you have the narrative around it. Then if we look at the gender pay gap here, so when you're reporting over, and I'm just going to explain with the quartiles here, which is to answer that person's question in regards to the actual difference when you are reporting out on somebody, say for example at an MD level who's on 150,000 in comparison to somebody who is at for maybe a receptionist level who's at 25,000 euros. To get the average between there it's not a real figure. So they do have the quartiles here, which I'll explain in a second. First of all, let's have a look here. So as an overall, if I look at 2022 in regards to the gender pay gap, there's two different ways I can report on it. I can either report on it in absolute or percentage. So if I look at the absolute here, I can see that on average, because I have the average selected here, on average in this organization, on average a female is paid 62,000 euros a year, and on average my male employees are paid 141,000 euros. So that's the absolute and the average of that. If I want to maybe look at the median, be able to look at, say, if I have, this is reporting out on 25 employees, so the actual middle figure there, which isn't the average, so it's the 12th or 13th figure there, and what's the median there? So the median there is 56,000 and 70,000, and I can look at it as a percentage or an absolute. But if you want to actually find your actual gender pay gap that you're going to be reporting on in terms of percentage, it's the absolute and it's the percentage and the average. So if I look at this, I'm going to subtract 69.51%. I'm going to subtract 30.49% from 69.51. So that is going to give you your 30%, 39%. So in terms of this company, their gender pay gap is 39%. Okay, if that makes sense to people. It is a funny calculation, but that is an overall, that is a top level company figure that does not take into account the difference between high earner salaries. Okay, so in terms of if you were to look at, you want to compare the MD salaries, for example, so people in senior management, that means people who are earning in the top 75% to 100%, you're going to select that quartile here. And so that means that if we look at the absolute, so in my top earners in my company at the moment is made up of 6 people, which is made up of 4 employees, 4 males and 2 employees on an average. And my male employees at that top MD level are getting paid 335,000, and my females in comparison, the top earners, male comparison to female, there's 111,000 for employees. If I want to maybe look at the bottom side of things, so that's the people in the lower half of getting paid. So, for example, if we look at that, it's 100,000 euros, for example, that it's of a salary. The people who are getting paid between 75 and 100,000 would be in the top. People who are getting paid 50 to 75,000 would be in this quartile here. 25 to 50,000 here, and below 25,000 would be in this quartile. So you can see, is there an actual gender pay gap in each of the different pay quartiles. What do you mean by having the narrative around it? I'm not clear on what that means. It's just a question here. So if you are actually reporting on the gender pay gap, what there is required when you're actually giving your figures is that there is a narrative around it as well, so that you do need to write a couple of paragraphs in regards to explaining your figure. So say, for example, if you have, for example, like this one, to say that that we currently have a 30% gender pay gap figure, and you can show it in each of the different quartiles, that between 25 to 50% in that quartile, you don't really have a gender pay gap, and it gets bigger at the top half, and that's because perhaps maybe you can say we have an aging management team, this 4 males, 1 female. It is something that we would note, that we're trying to get more females involved in senior management, and we have a program in place, a leadership program in place for females. So whatever it is, so that's the narrative. Just because you have the figure isn't the only thing that people are looking to report on. You actually have to explain the figure as well. I hope that makes sense. We have a number of relief staff working for the organisation. If and when contracts, do we need to include the relief staff when reporting for the gender pay gap? So there is actually legislation in regards to how many hours somebody has to work, which I can send you afterwards, just to show you. And then you just don't actually, you just wouldn't include them in regards to the actual type of contract they're on. But more than likely, so they would only be, you're going to report on their hourly figure. So it is up to yourselves as well whether that is something that you want to focus on. Do you think that there is you'd like to report out as an entire company? Is there, by reporting out on the relief staff working for the organisation, is it going to negatively affect or positively affect what you do with the information? So should you be looking at that information? If that makes sense. So the important thing when we're looking at this, at this figure, sorry, at this chart, is you can report out by office. So, is there a discrepancy in different offices? You can report on by departments, by teams, and the year. So you can compare in regards to over the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it is. Have you improved, basically? You can also report then out on employment type. So that's where you want to compare is there a discrepancy between your full-time and part-time? So if I select part-time here for this example that I have, I only have here we go. I have in my part-time staff, I have 4 employees. I have 2 females and 2 males. The report here is saying, if I look at that, on average, a part-time employee is getting paid 45,000 euros a year, and an average male is getting paid 80,000 euros a year. So that would be something that I would want to be looking at to see, is it something that we need to address? Okay, so that's the different contracts there. In terms of the salary type, so again, if somebody is getting paid per hour, So again, that's why it's important. The question earlier was in regards to should you be recording people's salary per week or per hour? It's important that you're putting in what's relevant in your contract. So if somebody is actually on an hourly wage, does that make a difference? If somebody's on a salary, annual salary, does that make a difference? So make sure you're putting in what's exactly relevant in the contract. So length of service then as well, you can report out, and that's why it's important that you're putting the actual start date in correctly to make sure that you can report out. You can report out on the actual. I suppose compare. If somebody has been here for 1 year, have you been able to maybe ease the gender pay gap in comparison to people who have been here for 5 years? Is it still an ongoing issue to compare? And country of residence here as well. So most of our headcount is in Ireland. Just another question here. Most of our headcount is in Ireland, but we do have a number of employees elsewhere. Is it only the Irish headcount that is considered in the 250 plus threshold? My understanding, it is your entire company, but I will have to check that out actually for you and get back to you. But my understanding, it is your whole company. It's company based. But I will certainly double check that and get that back to you because I don't want to give you the wrong answer either. But so the country of residence, again, a good one to report. And if you've got, if you have an Irish or a UK office, is there a difference in regards to the gender pay gap, the reporting there? But I think the quartiles is really what you want to be reporting on. So when you are reporting the figure, you're going to have to give 4 figures. You're going to have to give the figure here. Sorry if I go to the percentage and average. So at my top earners in that 75 to 100% quartile, I have a gender pay gap issue here of the 75 minus 24, which is around 50%. In the third quartile, I have a gender pay gap issue here, maybe 13%. It's kind of about 1% here in regards to the 25 to 50% quartile, and 0 to 25, I have about a 13% difference here. So you'd report out on those 4 different quartiles. The information that comes into these 2 reports can always be found in reports in your downloads. So we're in employees and downloads. All the information is in the download directory export. So if you're looking to maybe take the information, maybe you may be using an ERP system or Power BI or anything like that, we can filter the information there for you as well. If you want to make sure, I suppose a really quick way just to give an overview over is all the information in the system. You can quickly just download the directory export, and I'll just share it with you here. I think this is the easiest way to do it. Just download your Excel spreadsheet and see where the blanks are. So what you're looking at specifically is to make sure that your start dates are correct, so that your years of service is correct. The gender is in correctly, well, that people have filled it in, or that to the best of their ability, I suppose. There's their gender here. Their employment types are filled in. That's important as well. And their salary. And their salary is filled in as well. And whatever benefits or bonuses they have as well, because that'll have to be reported out on as well. Okay. So that's the quick way. So it's just a nice way. I suppose you can filter out if there's any blanks and just concentrate on well, first of all, I suppose checking that the information there is correct, but also making sure that the actual the blanks are filled in as well, because that's the only way you're going to get an accurate report. So I suppose the best way to have a look at it is the reports are here for everybody in the system as it is. So you go to reports into employees, there's the gender pay gap and the gender balance there. Have a look at it, make sure that your information is correct. If you have any questions around it, please come back and ask somebody here in the team, and we'll be able to make sure that it's reporting properly for you. We'll certainly send out some information in regards to what the legislative requirements are. I think important to remember that you're reporting on the 4 quartiles here as well, which is the percentage and the percentage average. They're the 4 quartiles that you're going to be reporting out on. And again, to that person's question in regards to the narrative as well. So there is going to be required maybe a paragraph or 2 in regards to just to, I loathe to use the word justify, but to be able to explain either what you're doing, why it is like that, and what you're planning on doing to decrease it if there is. So even though it is not a legislative requirement at the moment for people less than 250, it's not a bad idea to come in here and have a look and see where you guys are at on the overall scheme of things. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time. As always, Jenny will send you on the information as well as any downloads we have with this and a recording of the video. And if anybody has any further information, any further questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you so much. Take care.